Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Metzia Daf Ayin Vav. Begin on the bottom of Ayin Hey Amid Beis, 3 lines up at the bottom of the Yamid, where we continue and begin the sixth parak, Parak HaSeicher Es Ha'umnin, which interestingly Taisus says that the reason why this parak is called HaSeicher Es Ha'umnin, and actually the next parak is called HaSeicher Es HaPoyalim, is that because the terminology Umnin actually would include a shiur, a daily labor, and a kablan is someone who has a contractual agreement. But the next parak, this picks poyalim, because poyalim only is understood to mean shiur, because that's what it's talking about over there, specific over this. So that's these two different parakim of soicher, the two different types of soicher, so and soicher poyalim. Just goes by the kazach and cheskel. Turn to today's daf. Throughout the entire world. So discussing today's daf are like the opening topic of the Mishnah of this parak. If someone hires craftsmen, workers, the hitu zeh, and they mislead each other. So the Mishnah says they only have complaints. You don't have a monetary claim. You just have the ability to have a complaint. Now, what does it mean, hitu zeh? So either it means to say the atu poil ma'adodi, that it means to say that workers fooled each other, meaning the employer said to one of the employees, it says, do me a favor, get me more workers. And the worker said something different to the new workers, to the new employees, than what the employer told them. Or hitu zeh means to say, no, chazor zeh, as a simple understanding would seem to indicate that the employer and the employee, one had backed out from the obligation of the other one. Which, when it comes to chazor zeh, backing out one from the other one, so then the Gemara differentiates between b'shaloi holchu, if the workers never ended up going, or holchu, if they did go, then leislam schar mishalom, then you have to give them their full wages. Also, another differentiation is regarding his chilu b'melacha. They started doing work b'davar she'ein avid, something that's not something that's going to get ruined if you don't do work in it right now, versus his chilu b'melacha b'davar avid, and there is no workers to do, then we could actually go ahead and take advantage of those workers who backed out, as the Gemara will explain. To begin the current daf, the sixth parak, Parak HaSeicher Es Ha'umnin, continuing with other halachas related to money, now regarding the employment of a worker. It says the Mishnah, HaSeicher Es Ha'umnin, if someone hires a worker, the hitu zeh, and they mislead each other or deceive each other, and the Gemara is going to explain exactly what does that mean, hitu zeh? Who's the zeh? What is hitu? But be that as it may, says the Mishnah, ein lehem zeh. They only have the ability to have a complaint, but you don't get any monetary compensation for that. Another case is the Mishnah, someone hired a donkey driver or the wagon driver, lahavi piryofarin, to bring the wood that is planed and it's nice, because he wants to make some type of a carriage or some type of a period, which is more like what the kalas or they sit in, or v'chalilim, or let's say flutes lekala, for the kala, for the bride, to mesamechas mekala, or lameis. Sometimes they would play a lamentation on flutes. So that's one type of case. So he hired a donkey driver or a wagon driver to bring these items, or poilin, or let's say he hired a worker lahalis pishtanim min amishra, to bring the flax, take it out of the water where the canvas and the linen soaks when they're in their stalks. Meaning, what's so unique about these cases? Says the Mishnah, or anything that's going to be a loss, because these things are time sensitive. You need to do them right now. Obviously, the chasna is going on right now. The lavai is going on right now. The flax, you got to take it out right now, like the food from the oven. Something's going to get burnt if you don't. The chazru behent, you hire these workers, and then they back out. They're not doing the job. So says the Mishnah, Mokum she'in sham adam. If it's a place where you can't find any other workers to do this job, and the linen's getting ruined, and he's relying on the worker, so there's two options that you could do. Either soicher alein, either you could hire other people, which generally, let's say, wouldn't do the job, but they say, I'll do it for you for like 5 times the amount of how much it usually costs. and the responsibility of that payment is on the worker who backed out. He's going to have to pay for that. Or you could mislead the worker who's backing out, as the Gemara is going to explain on Ayin Vav Mebez exactly what does that mean. Another halacha, says the Mishnah, these are all different hasaycher esa'umnin type of cases regarding backing out. So hasaycher esa'umnin, someone hires a worker to do a job, the kablanis, which is that you make up, you'll fix my car for $700, I don't care how long you work or whatever, just to do a job. And after they started doing some of the job, the guy's like, yeah, I'm not doing this job. He backs out after he did some of it. Halacha is yadam ala tachtaina. They have the lower hand, meaning if the price of the workers went up, and now it's already 3 weeks later or 3 months later, whatever it is, he can't find someone to finish the job for the price that would have been what these guys still had to do. What he could do is he could hold back from the payment from what they did, whatever he needs to spend more now till he gets the job done, based on what the price he had made up with these original workers. Now, same thing is the other way. If the price of workers went down, and now this guy's backing out halfway, you could find someone to finish the job for cheaper. So he evaluates for the guys what they did, and he gives them what he made up with them. So if they did half the job, he gives them half their wages. Meaning, and the chiddush is, the workers cannot say, hey, these other workers are taking our place to finish your job. Give us all our wages except for what these guys are taking. No. Either way, they're going to have, the guy who's backing out is going to have the lower hand. Now, as you get into Bava Vav Medalf, and Balabayis Chazabai, if the employer, if the one who's hiring, if he backs out, Yodoy al Tachton, so he has the lower hand. Which the specific case of that is, like Rashi explains, is that he has to give them everything that they did. So if the price of the workers went down, so then he has to give them everything except for what he has to pay to finish the job. That's considered the lower hand because he's paying them more than what they actually did. It's just because now he can get labor that's even cheaper, so he's got to pay them that besides, again, what he has to pay for the other workers. Finishes off the Mishnah, 2 halachas that are similar. Whoever deviates from the contract, for example, let's say he gave wool to the dyer to dye it red and he dyed it black. Yodoy al tachtaina. The guy who deviated, he has the lower hand. So let's say what happens is there's obviously when you do a job, there's expenses and then there's the improvement of the item. Obviously, so if the improvement is more than the expenses, you don't give him his full wages. You give him however much the expenses were for his wood and for his dye. And if the expenses were more than the improvement, meaning it costed $10,000 to improve this rug, value of $300 more, so then you only give him the improvement. You're going to give him the lesser of the two because he deviated from what we had agreed upon. And the last halacha is whoever backs out, which the Gemara doesn't explain what are we coming to include. Seemingly we said a lot of these types of cases. Yadai al tachtain, again, whoever backs out, he has the lower hand. So the Gemara goes now to explain the opening halacha of our Mishnah. That we spoke about hasaycher esa'umnin, and we said vehitu ze'azeh. They deceived each other, so then, okay, all you have is the ability to complain. Says the Gemara, chazru zeh bezeh lo katani. It doesn't say that they backed out one from the other, which then obviously we would have read this hitu, we would have read, meaning it's either the employer or the employee that is backing out from the other one. Because it should have then said a terminology of chazara, of backing out. It doesn't say chazara zebezeh. Elahitu zezeh. They misled. Now, what would that mean? If the simple understanding would be that one of them backed out, then you should have said the word chazru. Why are you saying hitu? So rather, says the Gemara, it means the atu poila ma'adadi. It means that workers deceived other workers, meaning one of the workers misled his friend, which means that the employer had told the employee something regarding getting other workers, and he said to other workers different than what the employer had said. Says Gemara, Heichadam, what's the case? So Damali Balabais. The employer says to one of his workers, says, do me a favor, Zil Arguli Poilim, I need more workers. You're not enough. Go hire me other workers. And he went and he misled them. So the Gemara says, well, Heichadam, well, you're telling me that when this guy misled the Hitu Zeh, you're saying there's no monetary compensation. It's just he could have taraimis, he could have complaints. What is this talking about? If it's talking about where the employer had said, look, I'm willing to pay 4 zuz a day. And then he goes to his friends, his buddies, he says, guys, my employer is looking for workers. He's willing to play bitlasa. He's willing to pay for 3 zuz a day. So the question is, what type of complaints could they have? Saver v'kabel. They understood what they were being asked to do. They accepted to do it for 3. So you're right. Although the boss was offering more, there's no one being misled over here. So what type of complaint it is? He's like, I don't need my boss to spend more. He said, look, he's willing to pay 3. Did his boss a favor, whatever. So what's the taremis? What type of complaints is there? So that doesn't seem to be what the case could be talking about. And if it's the other way around, if it's where the employer had said, I'm willing to pay 3 zuz a day. And he says to them that the offer is for 4 zuz a day. Now, what happened was, obviously, when evening time comes, everyone's lining up to get their paycheck, the employer only gives them 3 zuz for the day. So then, wait a second. What's the case talking about? That you're telling me that the Mishnah says they could have taraimis complaints, but not more than that. And that is Maman of Shach, as the Gemara explains. If this employee had said to the other new employees, Scharchem alai, your wages are on me, I'm going to pay you. So then Nasablum today, he should have to pay him the extra zuz from his own pocket. It's not like learn the Brisa. If someone hires a worker to do, he claims from his own property. But he actually shows the workers to do on his friends, on his neighbor's property. So Allah is, so the guy who hired them, although they didn't even do a job on his own property, he has to pay the workers like he asked them to. He has to pay the full price. Then he goes back to the guy, his neighbor, the other owner, and the guy has to compensate him for what he benefited him. Fine. So that would be the same thing over here. The balabais, he was benefited 3 zuz for the day. So okay, he'll compensate the employee who hired the other employees, who said, I'll pay you. He'll pay him 3, but he's got to pay the workers 4 because that's what he promised them. As like we see, he has to give schorchem mishalom. So there wouldn't be just taremis, he would have to actually pay them 4. So Gemara says, Lo tzricha, no. Case talking about, he said to them, schorchem al balabais. He said, I'm not paying you. My boss asked me to get more workers. He's going to pay you 4 zuz for the day. And that's not what he said. He only said 3. But the worker himself doesn't have to pay. So they can have taremas and complaints on them and say, you told us 4, we're getting only 3. But there's no monetary compensation because the boss never said that. And the worker doesn't have to pay. So that's what the case in Mishnah we're talking about. The Gemara has, however, a problem and says, wait a second. Let's see how much do workers usually get hired for. And that is, if they usually get hired for 4 zuz a day, then the balabais would have to give 4 zuz a day. Because we just quoted a Bryce that said that if, let's say, someone else hires workers for somebody else, and he has them do work on his friend's field, we said that the guy could collect from the balabais what he benefited him, even though he didn't even command him. Now, if workers go for 4 zuz a day, then he benefited him 4 zuz. So therefore, he should have to pay the 4 zuz. And if workers get only hired for 3, then what's the complaint? It's not possible to get 4 anywhere else. We didn't make you lose anything. No one pays 4. So the question is why don't you just see how much workers usually get hired for? So the Gemara says, Lo tzricha, no, it's necessary the ikad de mager barba. There are some who pay 4, the ikad de misker betlasa. There are some who pay 3. The amrulei. This is where the taremis comes in. They tell him, look, ilav the amrit lana barba. Had you not told us that you're going to pay us 4 zuz a day, tarchinan, we would have put in the effort to find somebody that really needs workers. We would have got hired for 4 zuz a day. You deceived us, and you told us we're getting 4. Now we're only getting 3 because the Balabais only said 3, and you said 4. But you didn't say it's your responsibility to pay. You said the guy is going to pay, and he's only giving us 3. So he only has to pay 3 because we only benefited him 3 because some only pay 3, but some pay 4. We could have potentially gotten 4. Therefore, we are upset at you. We have tyremas, we have complaints against you that you told us 4. That's one pshat in this hitu zezeh. If you want, you could say that actually hacha b'balabayis askina. What does that mean by balabayis? So the way Rashi explains, we're talking about a worker that has for himself his own fields. He generally does not hire himself out to do work by others unless it's a very good opportunity of a job of getting paid. That's why it's going to be considered as taraimis, because the workers could tell this guy who hired them, this other worker, Ilav the Amrit Lambarba, had you not told us that there was 4 zuz, it would have been degrading for us, to get hired out for 3. I wouldn't have done the job for 3. I'm not a desperate worker. I have my own field. When I get a good job, a side job, I figured, why not? I can make a little extra cash. Might as well. But I only did it because of 4. I wouldn't have done it for 3. So therefore, even if you don't take the Gemara's previous answer that some places are 3, some places are 4, I wouldn't have done it. Even if, let's say, the going rate is 3, but I wouldn't have done it because I have my own company. But you told me 4, so therefore, that's the complaint. No, because if you're a worker, so workers, if the comp is 3, then you would have done 3. We're saying this guy is I wouldn't do 3. It's embarrassing. I have my own company, and I have John's lawn mowing, and I'm saying I don't need to do a job by you. I have my own jobs, right? But you're willing to pay me a lot more, so I was willing to do it. So that's considered why it would be hitu zezeh, and therefore it'd be considered as taraimus. Now the Gemara says, if you want, you could say that actually no. Truth is, we're talking about a regular worker, which usually works for others. Not like we just said the previous answer that by Balabais that he's his own has his own company. But the Amrile, they could tell him, Kivan the Amritlan Barba, since you told us you're willing to pay us 4 zuz a day, which is much higher than the going price, Tarchinan, we put an effort. We did a very good job for you. We're going to go all out, all the trimmings, because we don't usually get paid so much. So, therefore, that's the tightness they have. You're right. The going rate was 3, and they shouldn't be able to have taremis. But they could. You told us 4. We went all out. We usually take a 45-minute lunch break. We took a 20-minute lunch. We went. So the Gemara says, what's the tightness? Let's see what type of work they did. If they did, then maybe that's what they benefited. So it says, no, but talking about berifka, talking about where they dug ditches around the field, and you don't recognize the type of work that's done, the quality. It says, why? Rivka never made the other. You could also tell from how they did the ditches if it was done well. So the Gemara no demalya maya below yadi. It's already filled up with water. You can't tell now on the bottom what type of quality was done, and therefore you can't necessarily compensate them. But at the same time, they could have kindness because they could say, "Look, you told us more, and if we did a better job for you, and now we're not getting it, so we're upset at you." Now, Ibaysim, if you want, you could say similar to what we were saying before. We had rejected a certain approach before. The Gemara is coming back to it. Truth is, you could say that the employer had promised 4 zuz for the day. And the worker, he told them, my boss is willing to pay 3 zuz a day. Now, the comment that said, you say, what do you mean? Why should it be taraimis? Some of a couple, they knew, they were aware of the 3. They accepted that. And so no one's deceiving them. He's just lowballing them because why not? He was saving his boss a few dollars. Because normally they could tell him, Leslach, don't you consider the pasuk in Mishlei, Al Timna Toiv Mi Balav? Don't hold back good from its those who contain it. Mean to say, like, you, what's wrong with you? The boss is willing to pay 4 zuz a day. And you stam kemf again, and you tell us for 3, and we get hired for less. So that's the taremis they could have, and then you're right, we accepted 3, but but your boss was willing to pay 4. Why'd you tell us 3? So that could even be when the boss was willing to offer more and he offered him less, which is what? If he took the money as here, right? But that doesn't sound like it. Sounds like the boss is only paying them 3, right? If he would have done more in the Chanami. Well, it's a good question because the boss didn't really say that. The boss told him. The boss didn't say you could get a commission. The boss says I'll pay them 4 zuz a day. Now that's a little bit deceptive to offer them less and pocket that money because that's not what the boss was offering. That's it's a little we get the commissions involved over there to check what's SEC over there to see what's going on over there.
It doesn't talk about commission talks. It should be more passionate to the poor worker than
Right.
the rich owner.
Right. I mean, that's Robin Hood. Where you, well, what do you steal from the wealthy and give to the poor? Don't steal from the poor and give to the wealthy. Now, a related discussion regarding what this guy just did, that we're discussing that he deviated the employee, the guy, the shliach, so to speak, deviated from the mishaleach's words. So this opens up a whole interesting conversation, a little bit complex, but an interesting conversation. Says the Gemara, Pshita. It's obvious the following idea. So if the employer says, look, get me workers for 3 zuz a day. Then he tells the worker, says, look, my boss is willing to pay 4 zuz a day. And this is again very technical, but you have to pay attention. They tell him, we're willing to do whatever it is that your boss had said. Now, this is very, very tricky because you could see such a thing happening. He's hiring workers. He says, yeah, whatever your boss says, we're willing to do it. Again, his boss had said 4, and his boss had said 3. And he said that we're hiring for 4. Says the Gemara, their intention is on the higher price. Meaning, even though they say to him, okay, we're willing to be hired like what your employer had said, that wasn't to diminish from the set amount that this guy had told them, the headhunter. It was to add on. And they were saying, we trust you that this is what the employer had said. Now, since the truth is that actually the employer had said less, if this guy had said, the headhunter, it's my responsibility to get you paid, he's going to have to pay from his own pocket. If he said that the wages are on the employer, they could have taramis on him. Because their intention when they said, okay, it's like whatever your boss said, well, the boss only said 3. The headhunter is saying 4. They didn't mean to say, oh, less than what you're saying. They just meant to say, if it's even more. But definitely, they are considering the 4 that he's saying. Now, that's obvious to the Gemara. Ella, but, however, says the Gemara, what we don't know is the following question. If the employer had said 4, then this headhunter says, I have a job for you, 3 zuz a day. And they say to him, okay, we're willing to take the job, just like what the employer is willing to give. What's the halacha? What's the question? So the Gemara explains. Adibudi didei, is it on the words of this worker, meaning this headhunter, this shliach? Is it on his words kasamchi that they're relying? The amrili, they're telling him, mehem nislan, we trust you. That this is what your employer had said, and therefore they only get 3 zuz a day, and they get also the taramis, obviously, of al tim natayv, that why did you end up, undercutting and offering less? Or maybe, no, they don't trust him. What they're telling him is, adiburi de balabayis kasamchi. We're relying on the words of your employer, and they did not agree and accept this headhunter's terms of 3 zuz a day. They will actually take 4 zuz a day. What did they mean when they said, yeah, kamash amabalabayis, like the like the employer said. Would that mean to say that they could even take not what he had said? They had heard only 3 zuz a day. But when they said, like, oh, yeah, sure, like your boss said, would that take them up to the 4 zuz a day or not? So the Gemara says, Tashima. Gemara says, let's bring a raya from the following braysim. And this is also a little bit of complex, but it will the Gemara will attempt to bring a raya from this to the question that we're discussing. If a woman tells somebody, look, me and my husband not getting along. If you find my husband, have ligiti. Now this is very specific over here. She tells him that bring me my get. So what she's telling him is that I want him to send me my get through you, and that you should become the shliach of my husband, not my shliach, the shliach of my husband to divorce me, that when my get comes to my hand. The reason why that's important is because a shliach lo hilacha, an agent of delivery, is on the husband to do. And then the woman gets divorced when the get comes to her hand. In contrast, what's called the shliach likabala, a shliach of receipt, is on the woman to do. That he should be like her shliach and like her. And that she becomes divorced when the get comes to the hand of the shliach. So the woman said, and again, that's why I said very specific, haveli giti. Don't be makabel my get, bring me my get. Meaning, I want you to go to my husband and be his shliach lohelach. Okay. The problem is, when this shliach ends up finding the husband in the shtibel, he says, V'ishtacha amr, your wife said, hiskabeli giti. Receive from me my get. Okay. Now here's the final one. And the husband says, Heilach kamash amra. Go with it like she said. Now what's the halacha? He's saying that the wife said one thing. The wife actually said something else. So Rav Nachman Amarav Rabu Amarav says, Avila higia get liyoda in magudeshes. Even if she ends up getting the get to her hand, even then, meaning forget about when the shliach receives it. Even when it ends up getting to her hand, she's not going to be divorced. Says the Gemara, from this halacha we could answer our question. Why? Shamim may know we could infer from this halacha, adibura didei kasamach. The husband was relying on the words of the shliach, of the middleman, when he says, like they said, he thinks what the middle guy is telling him is what he's really relying on, and that's what he means to say when he says, like the one who sent you said. And even so, and that's really what the husband's telling him. He says, I trust you that this is what she said. What did the shliach say she said? That be a shliach l'kabbalah for me. Now, by default, that means to say that the husband is not making him a shliach l'halacha, because that's not what the wife had asked for. So there's no shlichus here. Because the woman can't make a shliach l'halacha, and she had told him, havili, which means be only a shliach l'halacha and don't be a shliach l'kabbalah. But the husband only gave it as a shliach l'kabbalah. But such a shlichus the husband can't make. So this guy is not qualified to do anything. And therefore, even when the woman gets the get, there was no agency given to give this to this woman. And therefore, she's not going to be divorced even when it comes to her hand. So the Gemara says, you see that to answer our previous question regarding the employer and the employer, we got hiring workers, that when they say, like your boss said, they mean what you're telling me the boss said. Says the Gemara, because the Isak, if you're going to think to say that the husband is relying, going back now to the case of the get, that the husband's relying on the true words that the woman said, and he doesn't believe the shliach, what he's saying is what the woman, what his new soon to be ex-wife said. No, it's what she really said. He's saying, do like she said. If that's the case, then that means to say that he's really making him a shliach l'halacha, because that's what the wife had asked for. Now that the husband has the ability to make a shliach l'halacha, so then the question would be, should at least be divorced when she gets to get to her hand, because he's a shliach l'halacha, because that's what the wife really asked for, and that's what the husband could make. And the fact that the halacha is telling us that she's not in divorce even when it gets to her hand is obviously because he's not saying like she really said. He's saying like what you're telling me she said, which is not the case. So then to enter our question regarding the halacha that we were just asking before, that the employer had said 4 zuz a day, and the worker said, oh, my boss is offering 3 zuz a day. And they said, okay, like your boss said, man, yeah, like your boss said. What are they really relying on? What you're saying the boss said, not what the boss said. They're not going to get 4 zuz a day. They're going to only get 3 zuz a day. That's what the Gemara wants to prove from here. So Rav Ashi here gets a little bit more complex. He says, no, not a raya. Hachi hashta? Can you compare the cases? It's not comparable. So Gemara just starts spinning things over here. Bishloimi itma ibcha, if we had said the opposite, so you have to like halt cup now. We're saying the opposite now. Which means to say, let's say she had said, hiskabali giti. Let's say she says to the shliach, I want you to be a shlich likabala. I want you to receive from me the get, which that's the woman's agency to make. The problem is, the shliach comes to the husband and says, the ishtacha amra, and your wife said, haveli giti, bring me the get, meaning that you should make me a shlich la'ilacha. Now, the husband says, okay, hey, look, I'm going to take it like she said. And if on that, this is all hypothetical to show what could have been, had this been the case, and that would have proved it, but the case that we're trying to bring from is not proving it. If on this, it would have then said, that he would have said that she's divorced, then you could have learned out, according to what he's saying, to say that when the get comes either to the shliach's hand or to her hand, which we're going to explain in a second, that it should be a divorce, you could have then proved either that is relying on what the shliach is saying, or that is relying on what the woman actually said. If that would have been the case. How so? So the Gemara explains both of these options. If Rav Nachman was saying that if Mishigia get liyadoy, that when the get comes to the hand of the shliach, that then Megudeshes, then she's divorced. Oh, that would have proved, Alma, that you see, that Dibura Didakasama, that is really relying on what the woman had really said. And he doesn't believe the shliach. And he's agreeing to give it over through the medium of what the woman had really said, which was that he should be a shlich likabala. So the husband himself is divorcing her when it comes to the hand of the shliach. That would have been a good raya that he relies on the mishaleach, not the shliach. Or inami, or let's say, if it would have said, Rav Nachman's teaching on this the other way. If he would have said, mishigia get liyada, that when the get comes to her hand, not to the shliach's hand, it comes all the way to the woman, then Megudeshes, then she's divorced. But not when the shliach receives it, then you could have learned out, you see, the other way. You see that the buri didei kasamach, that he's relying on what the shliach is telling him. And he's telling him that I trust you. And therefore, what did the shliach say? That your wife had said, haveli. Okay, so he's making a shliach la'ilacha. And the shliach is in agreement to stop being a shliach l'kabbalah for the woman, and instead, he's being a shliach la'ilacha for the husband to divorce, which he could do, and he did his shlichus, and he goes all the way to the woman. If this would have been the case, and Rav Nachman would have said one of these two things, you could have proven one of these two options, either adibura didei or adibura dida. The problem is what you're trying to bring a raya from Elahasam, that you were teaching the halacha. That we said that the woman had said havili, and then the shliach changes to hiskabali, and then the husband says do like she said. That the halacha that was quoted said that she's not divorced at all. You cannot learn out from the teaching of Rav Nachman, as the Gemara had attempted to do, to show that he relies on what the shliach is saying, and like you wanted to say, so therefore there's no shlichus at all. It's not true. Because even if you say that he relies on what she is saying, that even the husband went and made him a shlich le'ilacha, like the woman had said, so we had asked, wait a second, if you're relying on what she's saying, and she said make a shlich le'ilacha, and the husband is saying do like she said, and he can make a shlich le'ilacha, so why wouldn't it be a shlich le'ilacha? Why wouldn't she be divorced when it comes to her hand? No, it's not true, says the Gemara. There's no shlichus over here. You know why? Why not? The wife asked for something. The husband's doing exactly what she said because you're forgetting about the middleman. The shliach is not willing to do that, as the Gemara explains. Because the agent is uprooting his willingness to do this agency. Because the Amalei, what's he telling the husband? Shlich l'kabola havina. I will be, and this is what he's telling him that the wife had said, I will be a shlich l'kabola. I don't want to put in the effort to schlep all the way back 17 miles to go give it back to the woman, which is what a shlich l'locha has to do. And therefore, I'll be a shlich l'kabola. But lohilacha, to go all the way and bring it back to her? No, loy havina. That I'm not willing to do. And that's why he says that she said, make me a shlich l'kabbalah. Because I don't want to, the shlich l'kabbalah, the second he gets it, she's divorced already. He sends a telegram, it says, honey, you're divorced. Oh, so therefore, even if he subsequently changes his mind, like the case the Bryce was saying, and he's like, you know what? She's waiting for her again. And he trudges back to 17 miles and he comes to her. No, he's not a shliach that could give the gerushin because when he received it, he didn't receive it with that intention. He didn't accept the shlich l'alacha job. He was only being a shlich l'kabbalah, but no one ever made him a shlich l'kabbalah. And that's why it's not going to be a get. But there's no raya. Could be even that the husband is relying on what she's saying, not on what she's saying, and still it's not going to work. So had you said a different case, the Gemara would have been a raya, but the case that you're actually bringing from is not a raya, which Rashi has a difficulty. He says, wait a second. But didn't we say the opposite? Didn't we say that when she says, receive it for me, and the husband says, and he tells the husband that your wife said, bring it to me, and then the husband says, okay, do like she said, and you told me that if that would have been the case, then when the get comes to her hand, she would have been divorced. We would have learned out from there that we're relying on what she said, and he's giving it to him on the condition that he should be a shlich l'kabbalah. But why didn't we ask over there, what do you mean? But the shlich was his shlichus. He's not willing to be a shlich l'kabbalah. Why didn't you ask the question on the top of the Amud when you were saying like, oh, if you would have said that case, oh, that would have been a raya one way or the other way. But why? They were also you forgot about the middleman. Even though the husband and the wife are then saying the same thing, but the shlich said, I'm not, he changed the words. He changed from being a shlich l'kabbalah to be a shlich l'halacha. Says Rashi, that you could say, it's not true. Had Rav Nachman said his halacha over there, then we would have said, that's not being oiker shlichus, because he's saying, I'm even agreeing to be a shlich l'halacha. For sure he's agreeing to be a shlich l'kabbalah, because Kabbalah is included in halacha regarding the tircha. If anything, he's saying that she said, like he's willing to go the extra mile, right? For sure, he's willing to be a shlich l'kabbalah, which the second he gets it, his job is done. So therefore, al kapanim, there's no raya that, as the Gemara attempted to bring from this brisa with Rav Nachman Rav's teaching, that we rely on the words of the shliach. We thought we had a raya. The Gemara rejected that raya. Now, going back all the way to the beginning of our Gemara from this perek, from this daf. Ibayis ema. We had originally asked, and we wanted to know, what does it mean hitu zeh? So we said, look, it doesn't say chazru zeh. So although simply we would have translated it's the either employer or employer backing out, so no, it's actually one worker misleading another worker, which got into the whole conversation. What do you do when the middleman, the headhunter, or whatever, changes the words of what the employer had asked for? That was the whole daf up until now. And now going back to the beginning of the perek, if you want, you could actually say, Hi Tana, the Tana of our Mishnah, Chazru Nami Hitu Karile. That he actually calls backing out with the words misleading. And when the Mishnah is saying Zeh, was talking about with the worker and the employer, not when one worker misleads another one. The time, like we learned the Brisa, that we see this idea that by workers and the Balabayas, you could still use the word Hitu, even though the Gemara had thought, well, it should have said Chazru. No, you see from a Brisa, someone that hires a worker, the Hitu is Balabayas, and they deceive the employer. Or the other way around. Balabayas, son, he misleads them. They only have in each other complaints. Because he could tell them, look, guys, you could go hire yourselves out to other people. And they could tell him also that when they back out from him, go hire other workers. But there's still taraimis, there's still complaints, because Lamaisa, he's going to have to try to find new workers. They're going to have to try to find new places of employment. There's no monetary claims, because this is just words that they were given, that I'll do the job or I'll hire you. But right. So that's right. So that's what Taisus asks. Well, even if it would be, let's say, that's still not a monetary claim. That's just garmi. That's indirect. I didn't damage you. I just indirectly now. So Taisus says that we hold like Remeir that's doing din de garmi, that you cause someone indirectly damage. If that's the case, why doesn't he give them at least like a pile bottle? Because it's because of him now that he doesn't have a job today. He says you could talk about that when he backs out, they still have places for employment. However, they can still have taraimis because it's going to be very difficult now. It's going to have to hustle, yassle. So it's not going to be so easy. So because of that, that's where you could have taraimis, Balk upon them, it's not a monetary claim. Now continues the brisa, but Medram, when do we say this, that they don't have a monetary claim? If he backs out, is only shaloi holchu. They didn't yet go to the place of the employment, and in the morning he tells them, but you guys, I changed my mind. I don't need you. I don't need you guys to work. So since they never went, okay, that's just taraimus. Aval holchu. But if let's say they went to the place of the work, for example, let's say they were chamarim, they were donkey drivers, that he hired them to bring grain from one place to another. He hired the movers, and they went. Well, they didn't find any grain over there. Or if let's say he hired payalim, workers that he hired to hoe his field, and they went, they find that the field is moist with water, which you can't hoe in that type of situation. He has to give them their wages from the whole day, mishalim, complete according to what was fit to come to them, as the Gemara continues to explain. Because it's not really true, not all of it. Because in a daima, you can't compare. I mean, he has to pay them the full day's wages, but not literally the whole day's wages. The reason for that is because in a daima haba toin laba reikun. You can't compare someone who comes laden with a load to someone who comes empty. Meaning, we evaluate by the donkey drivers how much would he be willing to take less from his wages for the whole journey. The fact that he's coming with an empty load. Versus coming, obviously guys go to work, right? You want to work, I'm not willing to get, I want to get paid. But if you tell me I wouldn't have to schlep all day, I would take $10 less to go ahead and be there and just drive my own donkey without any loads. That's how much you're going to pay them, because ultimately they didn't schlep anything. So too, you can't compare Isa Malach Yeshabatli. You can't compare someone who's doing work to someone who's just sitting and doing nothing, schmoozing, shooting the breeze. So you evaluate by workers, how much would a guy be willing to take a little bit less from his paycheck and sit around and just chew some tobacco than rather be hoeing all day and to take a certain amount of money. But again, you have to pay him his full salary. You just take off a little bit, because ultimately he didn't do any work. Now, going on the ratio of the halacha, because up until now we were explaining the concept of schirus, of hiring a guy. Now we're going to talk about concepts of kablanis, of when there's a contract where a guy had a certain job to do. So it's now another type of a qualification. But when do we say this idea of that they back out, or he backs out, that okay, you only have taraimis, you only have complaints. That again, it's the same what we said before, just that was regarding labor, and now we're talking about someone who is a contractor. So that's only shlo yischil b'malacha. If they didn't yet start the job, but if they started the job, then there's a different halacha between them. What's the halacha? So here, it's shaman lehem masha asu. You evaluate what they did according to what the conditions of the contract were, and they accept according to the calculations of what they've done. So the Brisa illustrates. Kiblu kama likta. Let's say they accepted to have standing grain that they're going to harvest. They go to a wheat field. And he made up with the workers, b'shnei slam, they're going to get paid 2 slam. Let's say they only harvested half, and they left half. And they stopped halfway through the job and said, guy, we're not doing this anymore. the owner says, guys, I can't afford you anymore. We got to stop the job. Or let's say beged lerig. They had a job to weave a garment. You went to a tailor, a custom suit. B'shnei Islam, the guy said it's going to cost you 2 Islam. Or gechetzia, so they weaved half the suit. V'nichechetzia, and the other half he just left. So according to what the conditions were, what's owed to him is a seller. So shamalem as masha also, you value what they did, and that's how much they get paid. Let's say hayafa shisha dinar. Let's say that if, let's say, he's going to have to hire a new guy to take over the job for the second half, he's not going to find anyone willing to do it less than 6 dinar. Now, there's 4 dinar in the seller. So, although technically half the job is 4 dinar, he won't find someone to do it less than 6 dinar. So, the balabais is going to lose out for what he's going to have to pay for the second half. Even so, we don't go based on what the future is going to bring about. We still evaluate the workers, what they did, according to the calculation of their conditions. So says the Brisa, Noislam Sela. You still have to give the worker 4 dinar, 1 sela. As Rashi explains, this Tana of the Brisa does not hold like we said in our Mishnah, the whoever backs out has the lower hand. If you recall, we had explained in the beginning of the daf that, well, if you back out, you have the lower hand. If I got to pay more now to get labor, I'm going to take away from your paycheck. I got to finish up the same amount that we had made up, the quote in the beginning. The Tana of the Brisa disagrees. It says, no, that has nothing to do with me. I did half, I get half, even though now you're going to have to pay more to finish up the job. Now, so either they get paid half of what they did, meaning they get paid of half the job, which is what they did, or they finish the job, and then they'll take the 2 Islam. Now, if let's say it's only worth a sela, meaning if let's say the owner will find workers to do the second half, not for 6 dinar, but 4 dinar, okay, so then nice lamb, then he's going to give the workers what they did, a sela, which later on the next daf and daf and I think going to ask, well, that's obvious, right? The job was 2 Islam, he did have the job, and now he'll find a worker for a sela, which is half the amount. What's the chiddush in that? The Gemara will ask that. Rabbi Shloimy, he says, Shama lehen masha asin li asis. No, Rabbi Shloimy, like Rashi says, holds like the town of our Mishnah, that whoever backs out, he gets the lower hand. So therefore, the employer could hold on to wages that they earned to hire workers to finish according to the first conditions that they had originally made. So we have to evaluate how much you're going to get paid for half the job that you did. I got to first evaluate what it's going to cost, the projected outcome now of this project. So let's say hayayafa, let's say what's the value of what has to still be done. Is shisha dinar? Is 6 dinar? You're not getting your 4 dinar. So therefore, nois lehem shekel. He only gives them, a shekel is a half of a sela. He gives them only 2 dinar, because the job will then get done for 2 slum, which is 8 dinar. Because I got to pay workers 6 dinar now, not just 4. Or let them finish the job and get paid the 2 slum. Now, vimsela, if let's say I could get workers to do the remaining job for a sela, okay, then he'll give them a sela, which again the Gemara later on is going to ask also pashut. That's obvious because you're only getting workers only going to cost you 4 dinar. You'll give them the other 4 dinar. Now continues the Brisa and says, wait a second. When we say this idea that the one who backs out doesn't lose, it's only, let's say, according to Rabbi Shloimy, according to the calculation, and according to Rabbanan, according to what they accepted to do. But they'll get compensated. They just, it's just machlek is exactly how do you evaluate that. When did we say this? Is only with davar she'ena avid, only regarding something that there's no loss involved. Meaning, even though there's no workers right now to find, as we explained in the Seifa, that there's no workers right now, you're going to have to wait until you find workers. But since it's not something that's going to get ruined by waiting, it's just obviously inconvenience. So that's where we say this halacha. But let's say something if you're going to have to wait. If he doesn't find workers to do the job, even according to the whatever much of how much it's going to cost, he can't find workers, and the thing is getting ruined. then Seicher, what he could do is he could hire other workers, alehen, on the expense of the first workers, more than how much he'd hired them, oy matan, or he could mislead these first workers. So what does that mean? So it says the Brisa, ketzad matan, how does he mislead them? So oy malehen, so he tells them like this. He says, look guys, Sela ketzatzi lechem. I had made up with you guys, I'll pay you one Sela. You know what? Bo v'tlu shtayim. Come and I'll pay you double, which he's not going to pay them. He's allowed to mislead them. Say, oh yeah, you pay us. Oh, we'll finish the job. Okay, that's one option. Or the other option, which the Gemara asks, "Va'ad kama serchalein." How much are we saying that you could rent based on new workers based on the expense of the first workers? Says the Gemara, 40, 50 zuz. You could charge a lot to take off the salary of the first workers. Now, remember, when do we say this? That he could hire workers on the expense of the first workers when he doesn't find anyone else to take over the job. That's as much ancient poilam lisker, when there's no other workers to hire. So he's got to ask like regular people and he'll pay them a lot of money. But there are other workers to hire. And he says, and he says, yeah, go hire from these guys. Then you're right, only has on them complaints, nothing more than that. Says Tanitana, there was someone who taught a brisa that we mentioned before, Kamei de Rav, the one about that the donkey drivers go and they don't find and they work. So the brisa said, we said you have to pay them the full wages because these guys didn't know and they came there and there's the field is wet. You got to pay them for the job. So Amalei, so that Rav said to the one who taught the brisa, Chavivi Amar, my uncle Reb Chia says, Ila no havoi, if I had been over there, meaning if I would have been the employer, I would only pay them like a worker who's not doing anything, meaning like I'll pay him the wages, but like a worker who's not doing the work that he's doing. By the time you're saying that the price is saying that you have to go ahead and pay the full wages like a regular worker who's working. The Gemara wonders, wait, but the price qualified right after, that's not really the full amount. The Bryce says, and you can't compare someone that comes with a full animal to an empty one, or a bottle to someone who is doing the work or sitting and doing nothing, which the Bryce itself says that he only takes like a pile bottle, which is exactly what Rabbi Chia says. So what's Rav saying? Says Gemara, they didn't finish the end of the Bryce in front of them. They only said the words Mishalim, and therefore he thought it meant full. But you're right, he's exactly like the Bryce. Or Ikadam, those say a different version. No, Saimu Kame, they did finish in front of Rav, and they said there's like a pile bottle. What Rav was saying was Chavivi, my uncle says, no, had I been there, no, I wouldn't have given that all, not even like a pile bottle, because it actually is their mazel that caused it. And they should have entertained that maybe the field's going to be moist, and therefore, no, they don't deserve anything because they're not doing a job. And you're saying they should be paid like an idle worker. So the Gemara says, wait a second, but that's what Rabbi would have said. But then but the Brisa contradicts that. So the Gemara is not difficult because it depends on the case. They're not disagreeing. Rabbi's teaching is the Sayru La'ari Medu'urta. The workers had gone the night before and checked out the field. They scouted out and they saw, but they didn't realize that it's moist, or that they didn't realize that maybe it's going to rain during the nighttime. That's where Rabbi says they don't get any payment at all because you saw it for yourself, and that was with the conditions that I hired you, and they couldn't do the job, so they shouldn't have gone in the morning. So it's their fault. But the Bryce that we mentioned before is the loy sar la'ari ma'urte, where they didn't check out the field from the evening. So he should have paid the owner should have paid attention and notified them and says, "Look, guys, I want you to know it's going to be wet. I'm not going to give you anything." But he didn't tell them, so it's his fault. He has to pay them like a pile bottle. Like Rabbi said, when someone hires workers to dig ditches, and then it comes and it rains, where now you can't plow anymore. So it depends. If they went and they checked out the fields in the evening as it gets into and it rains, so say to the Pailim, it's the loss of the workers because he doesn't have to give them anything because he could say it's your mazel. If they didn't check it out, so he should have notified them. Say to the Balabayas, it's the loss of the Balabayas because they tell him, did you tell us that it's this field that you're hiring us for? We didn't know it's going to be this field. And therefore, then he has to pay them like idle workers. It depends on if we consider it as their fault, as the Gemara will continue on the next stop. Thank you for any time.